Hey guys, tonight we slip into silk cushions, drift beneath the whisper of distant waves, and open the sails on a sea of legend. The moon hangs like a silver coin over the ocean. The wind is soft. But you're pacing your palace in Baghdad, unable to sleep, restless in the heart. Despite the gold, the jewels, the baths scented with rosewater, something gnaws at you. It's not hunger. It's that old itch, the craving for chaos, the thrill of nearly dying in another exotic land. You know better. You should know better. But comfort's a quiet jailer, and your heart still races when you hear stories of far-off spice islands and monsters that shouldn't exist. So, against all reason and every piece of advice your poor servants mutter behind your back, you pack up again, this time with a little more wisdom, a little more coin, and a lot more snacks. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, post your location and local time down in the comments. I love seeing where you're listening from. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You board your new ship with a deep breath and a coin flipped into the sea for luck. The harbor of Basra sparkles behind you. Your crew is cheerful. The sky is friendly. And you're once again chasing riches and near-death experiences across the great unknown. The early weeks are smooth. Fish leap alongside your hull. Birds glide in lazy spirals above your sails. You eat dates dipped in honey and tell your favorite story about the time you were nearly eaten by a cyclopean giant. Twice. That one never gets old. But you know how this goes. One evening, the clouds gather like a grudge. Thunder hums low and menacing across the sea's back. The sky bruises purple. Then the winds hit, hard. The sails snap like whipcords. The crew scrambles, shouting prayers and curses in equal measure. You hold fast, drenched to the bone, as the ship heaves like a drunken camel. You've seen storms before, but this one's different. Less storm. More tantrum from an angry sea god who woke up on the wrong side of the ocean. A massive wave crashes over the bow, and for a moment you're underwater, weightless, cold, and absolutely rethinking your life choices. You resurface, coughing brine, only to find your ship breaking apart in splinters beneath your feet. The next thing you know, you're clinging to a broken timber like it owes you money, waves slapping your face, and not a single visible coastline in sight. Hours pass, maybe a day. You lose track of time and start reciting poetry to stay awake, mostly verses about drowning, oddly enough. Then, at the edge of your salt-blurred vision, something rises. Land. Sort of a grayish smear between sky and sea. You kick toward it with the last shreds of strength left in your poor, soggy body. You wash ashore like laundry, sand in your teeth, seawater in your ears. You lie there for a while, coughing and occasionally muttering "never again" between gulps of air. Seagulls judge you from above. When you finally stumble upright, you're greeted by silence. No welcoming party, no fresh fruit laid out on banana leaves. Just a bleak shore littered with odd-shaped stones and twisted driftwood that looks eerily like bones. A mainstream historical fact here. Shipwrecks during the Abbasid Caliphate era weren't rare. Monsoon patterns and wooden hulls made long-distance trade an ongoing gamble. Merchants took out early forms of marine insurance. You, unfortunately, forgot to sign up. You scan the horizon and spot something peculiar. A row of smooth, pale domes. Too round to be rocks. Too symmetrical to be natural. You limp closer. Curiosity outweighing common sense. They're eggs. Massive, bone-white eggs, taller than you, lying in clusters on the sand. Your stomach, unbothered by the physics of bird biology, growls, You crack one open. Inside, a gelatinous mass and a very angry squawk. The shell trembles. You back away, realizing, too late, that you're interrupting someone's nursery. A shadow falls over you. You glance up and freeze. Above, wings block the sun. Wide, leathery, and flapping with thunderclap force. A rock. A creature the size of a barn with talons the size of scimitars. Historians still argue whether the rock was a distorted account of the Epiornis, an extinct giant bird of Madagascar, or merely the fever dream of sleep-deprived sailors. You don't care. You're running. Well, limping rapidly, but too late. The rock, in a maternal rage, descends, claws outstretched. You scream something noble, like "Nope!" and dive under a fallen log. The wind from its wings flattens the grass. Then it's gone, airborne again, clutching something in its claws. One of the other eggs? A goat? A sailor who'd been hiding better than you? You don't know. You're just glad it's not you. Yet, you spend the night under that log, shivering, wishing for warm soup and fewer airborne predators. Tomorrow will be worse. You just feel it. Morning comes slowly, like a reluctant apology. Your body aches in ways you didn't know possible, and your mouth feels like it's been scrubbed with salt and bad decisions. You drag yourself upright and scan the beach, no rocks in sight. Thank heaven. But your stomach grumbles loud enough to attract attention from the next island over. You need food, you need water, you need a plan. The first thing you notice as you shuffle inland is that everything here is oversized. Trees with leaves bigger than blankets. Beetles the size of house cats skittering under fallen logs. Even the breeze feels exaggerated, rustling the jungle canopy like a warning. You pause, glance up, and remember that this is definitely not listed in any travel brochure. You reach a clearing filled with eggshells. Shattered white curves glitter in the sunlight, and deep claw marks scrape through the sand. You kneel down to examine one and get your quirky tidbit of the day. You find a shattered egg filled with jewels? No, just shiny fish scales and broken crab shells. Guess even rocks feed their babies seafood buffets. You trudge forward, weaving through trees until the landscape opens up into a sheer drop, a cliff edge, and below it, mountains. Not distant ones. Right there, jagged black peaks stretch across the valley like the spine of some enormous sleeping beast. Between the ridges, thick mists swirl and glint like heat waves. It's dizzying. You take one cautious step back from the edge, and the ground shifts. A shriek echoes from behind. You whip around. Again. You barely have time to scream before talons clamp around your waist, lift you off the ground and into the sky. You are flying. Terrifying. Breathtaking. You're high enough to see the curve of the island, the reefs around it like teeth. Wind howls in your ears. Your brain stops forming coherent thoughts, skipping right past panic and into raw sensory overload. Then, just as quickly, the rock lets go. You fall. Thankfully, not far. You crash into something solid, but not sharp. A pile of moss-covered boulders cushions your landing. Mostly. You bounce once, roll down a slope, and land in a pit that smells like rot, gems, and reptile sweat. You lie there for a moment, staring up at the patch of sky between two ferns, and say aloud, "This is fine. It is not fine. The air is hot, stifling. The rocks glitter, not from moisture, from embedded crystals. Diamonds. Real ones. You've fallen into the legendary Valley of Serpents, also known in later Arab geography as Wadi al-Hayat, the Valley of Life. Though, frankly, that seems misleading. The floor is littered with gemstones. Yes, but also bones. Lots of bones. A hiss interrupts your inventory of personal injuries. You freeze. A snake, thick as your arm, eyes like molten gold, slithers along the edge of the pit. It doesn't attack, just watches. You remember a fringe claim you once overheard in a Baghdad market, that snakes in remote valleys could live for centuries, growing wiser and crueler with age? This one looks old enough to recite poetry and call you boy. You do not move. More hissing, more snakes. Some emerge from crevices in the rock, others from nests built in old skulls. It's suddenly very clear why there are no other tourists here. Historians still argue whether the Diamond Valley was real or a blend of tales from Sri Lanka, where snake-infested highlands were once rumored to harbor precious stones. Some even believe Sinbad's Valley was a twisted memory of old gem mines, wrapped in monster metaphors. You don't care right now. You're thinking of one thing: get out. As the day drags on, the heat thickens and the snakes get lazy, curling into shadowy coils. You take a chance. Carefully, slowly, you begin to gather gems, just a few. You don't want noise. You stuff them into your robe, pretending not to notice the huge snake watching from a nearby ledge. Tongue flicking. Then a miracle. A slab of meat lands near you with a wet splat. You look up. More meat. Bloody goat chunks are falling from the sky. One lands on your foot. You scream softly. Above, circling the cliffs, you spot rocks again, swooping toward the valley. You remember now the old merchant trick. They throw meat down. The meat sticks to the gems. The rocks come for the meat, and the gems get carried out. And you're about to ride first class. You grab a thick slab of meat and tie it around your waist with strips of your now ruined sash. You pile gems on top, and, with a prayer that's half whisper, half desperate bargain, you lie still. The rocks descend. One lands beside you, talons gouging the earth. It lunges for your meat, attached to you, then lifts. You are airborne again, clinging to raw goat haunch and dignity. The rock flaps higher, away from the snakes and the diamonds, and carries you in a terrifying silence across the ridgeline. Eventually, it lands near a caravan of startled merchants. The bird drops its prize, you, and flaps off, muttering to itself. Probably. You groan, roll over, and find yourself staring into the shocked face of a bearded man with an armful of rubies. "Another one?" he says. "Apparently, this happens more often than you'd think. You're not sure what surprises you more, that you're still alive, or that nobody's helping you up. The merchants just stare. One of them nudges your foot with a sandal, like he's checking if you're part of the meat delivery. You sit up groaning, bits of rock feather stuck in your hair, goat juice soaking through your robe, and a small mountain of loose gemstones falling from your lap, like you've just robbed a dragon's sock drawer. The merchant who nudged you finally offers a hand. "Well," he says, "at least you're fresh. Apparently, they get a lot of half-eaten meat riders. You're now in the highlands on the far side of the island, a place ruled not by snakes or birds, but by opportunism. The traders, mostly Persians and South Indians, are here for one thing: the diamond trade. They throw their meat down into the cursed valley and hope to recover whatever shiny bits a rock was kind enough to deliver. It's high risk, high reward, and high weirdness. Clearly, one man gives you water, another hands you a crust of bread, a third starts asking about your robe's thread count and whether you're open to barter. You tell them your name, Sinbad, and watch their eyes light up. The name carries weight. People have started telling your stories even before you finish living them. A fringe tidbit in some later Arabic manuscripts. Sinbad's tales were already being retold by itinerant coffeehouse storytellers less than a century after the original compilations, sometimes with added bits like flying turtles and sentient fruit. You decide not to correct them when they add these flourishes. Eventually, one trader, a broad-shouldered man named Hamid, invites you to travel with his party. They're headed to Serendib, a lush island famed for its spices, elephants, and sultans who really love strange visitors with dramatic stories. You say yes immediately, mostly because you don't want to walk anywhere near snakes for the rest of your life. The journey to Serendib takes several days. You travel by ship, a sleek dhow loaded with cinnamon bark, sandalwood, ivory, and barrels of emeralds the size of your thumb. The ocean is calmer now. Maybe it's embarrassed by how it treated you earlier. You spend the voyage watching flying fish skim the waves and swapping stories with the crew. You quickly realize that even among seasoned sailors, your resume is absurd. When you mention being swallowed by a sea beast once, the captain just blinks. "And you got out?" he asks. "Stabbed it in the tonsils," you say, completely deadpan. You arrive in Serendib under a sky painted gold and violet. The harbor is crowded with sails from every part of the known world. Chinese junks, Arab dhows, African catamarans. Serendib, modern Sri Lanka, is a real-world hub, historically known for its gems and ancient connections to both Arab and Indian trade routes. Marco Polo even passed through centuries later, marveling at how elephants were used like living forklifts. The moment you step onto the docks, you're hit with scent: turmeric, saffron, roasted nuts, sea salt, and something sweet you can't place. Your nose practically levitates off your face. Hamid leads you through a warren of stone alleys, past stalls where men shout over bolts of silk and baskets of chilies. Monkeys chatter from tiled roofs. You stop once to buy a drink made from fermented coconut milk, which, by the way, does not go well with boat legs. Soon, you're led before someone very important. The king of Serendib. He sits beneath a canopy of velvet, his beard braided with golden threads, flanked by two bored-looking cheetahs wearing jeweled collars. His court is a riot of color and sound, musicians playing lutes, parrots squawking gossip, and servants fanning the air with peacock feathers. You bow deeply, whispering a mental reminder to not mention snakes, storms, or the part where you nearly married a cannibal once. But the king wants stories. He waves a hand, and everyone else vanishes into the corners of the chamber. "You," he says, "have eyes like someone who's fallen out of the sky recently." You laugh nervously, and he's not wrong. So you begin. You tell him about the rock, about tying yourself to meat like some kind of jewel burrito, about the valley of death and diamonds. He listens with the enthusiasm of a child at a puppet show. Occasionally he claps, once he gasps, and once he interrupts to ask, "Were the snakes single?" The king declares you a living treasure and demands you stay, just for a little while. Of course, spoiler, royalty rarely means just a little while. They set you up in a pavilion filled with cushions and fruit. Servants wait on you. Musicians serenade you to sleep. But something nags at you, like sand in your shoe. Maybe it's the feeling of being watched. Maybe it's the statue of an elephant outside your chamber that seems to move slightly every time you blink. At dinner one night, the king speaks of elephants. "There are bones," he says casually, "hidden deep in the jungle. White, perfect ivory. But no man has ever found the graveyard." You freeze mid-chew. Elephant graveyards. You've heard of them. Places where old elephants supposedly wander off to die in secret, leaving behind piles of ivory worth more than most kingdoms. Some think it's myth. Others, especially traders of the time, swore it was real. Historians still argue whether such graveyards existed, or were just overactive imaginations combined with clever poaching trails. The king stares at you. You stare back. You're starting to wonder if this is a test. You politely change the subject, but you know what tomorrow is going to bring. The next morning, your suspicions stretch and yawn themselves into full, uncomfortable confirmation. A servant wakes you before dawn, whispering something about an honored expedition. You sit up groggily, rubbing your eyes, only to find a full hunting party waiting outside your pavilion. At the front is the king's minister, grinning with the same expression someone might wear when asking you to crawl into a lion's den for fun. He gestures at the jungle and says, The king believes you are uniquely gifted. Perhaps you might help us find the elephant graveyard. You think about protesting. You think about faking a twisted ankle. But mostly, you think about how it might look if you turned down the king's personal request. You sigh. Of course, you say, channeling every ounce of fake enthusiasm you've built up over years of disasters. The jungle is wet, loud, and alive. Vines snake across the path. Birds shriek like they're gossiping about you. The smell of crushed leaves and wet bark fills your lungs. You ride a squat, slightly grumpy elephant named Suru, who ignores your attempts at small talk. As you push deeper into the jungle, the trees grow thicker, the light dimmer. Then comes the first sign, an ivory tusk, half buried in the mud, gleaming faintly like a lost smile. The guide gasps. The minister claps. You pretend you're not internally screaming. They follow your lead as you pretend to have some mystical nose for death, which mostly means you point at whatever direction looks slightly gloomier than the others. Eventually, you find it. A clearing so quiet it makes your ears ring. There, scattered across the grass, lie bones, huge ones, ivory curves like frozen waves, rib cages that could double as houses, skulls heavy enough to anchor ships. It's majestic, haunting, and just a little sad. You dismount and walk through the graveyard, brushing your fingers over smooth, ancient bone. Mainstream historical fact. Elephant graveyards likely emerged as myth from the observable behavior of elephants returning to certain areas when old or sick. Some archaeologists believe multiple overlapping elephant deaths in mineral-rich areas contributed to the myth. Quirky tidbit? You find a tusk with ancient carvings, not animal scratches, a spiral of symbols. The locals with you can't read them, but one mutters that it's the mark of the rainwalkers, a name no one explains. Naturally, you help the king's men map the site, mark the path, and dig up just enough ivory to fill 5 caravans. You're extremely careful not to disturb too much. You've read enough old legends to know what happens when you disrespect sacred burial grounds. Hint, it never ends with cake. When you return to the city, the king is ecstatic. He throws a feast in your honor. There are dancers, roasted peacocks, spicy tamarind wine, and a man who juggles flaming coconuts on stilts. The king claps you on the back and declares, "Sinbad shall never want for anything again." That sounds promising, until the next morning, when you wake up to find that your quarters are now inside the palace. You're now the king's advisor in residence, which is a nice way of saying you're not allowed to leave. They bring you fine robes, silver combs, breakfast on plates of carved jade, but no exit. And every day the king wants new stories. Tell me again about the one-eyed giant. Did the snake really talk? Are mermaids rude? You try to enjoy it. You do. But each day begins to feel like a silken cage. The guards smile too much. The gates stay closed. The king's jokes grow darker. You realize he's not just amused by you, he's collecting you. And that's when you start planning your escape. You charm the servants, make jokes with the guards. You start small, a smuggled map, a whispered name of a merchant ship leaving port soon, a little silver in a guard's pocket for forgetting to lock your chamber door. Historians still argue whether this part of the tale reflects real experiences of traders taken as curiosities by foreign courts, or if it was a dramatic flourish added by later storytellers to highlight the danger of luxury. Either way, you're done being someone's bedtime entertainment. On the night of the full moon, you slip away. You leave behind the silks, the carved sandals, even a few diamonds. You keep only what fits into a small satchel, a compass, a dagger, a flask of date wine, and one ridiculously oversized ivory comb. Because, well, it's really nice. You sneak through alleyways, past sleeping monkeys and empty spice stalls, until you reach the docks. There, bobbing gently in the tide, is your salvation. a black-hulled ship with green sails and a half-drunk captain who barely notices when you board. You cast one last glance at the palace, where a sultan sleeps unaware that his favorite conversationalist has vanished into the night. You're free. For now, the ship creaks like an old man's knees, and the deck smells of fish, sweat, and the faint tang of rum-soaked rope. But to you, it's freedom. Sweet, splintery, barnacle-encrusted freedom. You exhale for the first time in what feels like weeks. The sea wind kisses your face. Your clothes billow dramatically. And for a glorious moment, you pretend you're in charge of your own fate again. The captain, a wiry, sunburned man named Jalil, gives you a sideways look. "You good at anything?" he asks while chewing on something suspiciously crunchy. You shrug. "Surviving, mostly." "Good enough," he grunts. The crew doesn't ask questions. They're too busy unfurling sails, tightening ropes, and yelling at seagulls. You try to help, but mostly get in the way. So you settle into your unofficial role as shipboard philosopher and professional weather worrier. For several days, the voyage is smooth. You travel southwest, past little green islands floating like emeralds in the ocean, past flocks of seabirds that occasionally drop presents onto the deck. You learn how to tie knots, avoid the cook's suspicious stew, and distinguish between useful clouds and those clouds. The ocean, for once, behaves, which is suspicious. And of course, it doesn't last. On the 6th night, the stars vanish. The wind dies. A thick, unnatural fog rolls in, curling between the sails like smoke from a forgotten curse. Jalil frowns and mutters something about ill omens and not liking how the moon just quit on us. You laugh until the fog starts making noises. Whispers, creaks, splashes with no source, and then pirates, out of the mist, like ghosts born of sea foam and bad intentions. Another ship glides into view. No flag, no lights, just a row of silent figures along the rail, all cloaked, all armed, all very interested in your boat. Before anyone can shout, the grappling hooks fly. Ropes thud onto the deck. Pirates swarm over like ants at a picnic. You reach for a belaying pin, swinging wildly, screaming something heroic, probably. It doesn't help. You're quickly surrounded and politely knocked unconscious with the butt of a cutlass. When you wake up, everything smells like damp rope and disappointment. You're in the hold of the pirate ship now, bound at the wrists, your satchel gone, and your freedom feeling like a particularly vivid dream. Around you, other prisoners grumble in a half-dozen languages. One man is weeping softly, another's snoring. The pirate captain comes down an hour later. He's tall, bald, and has gold rings in both nostrils. That's how you know he's serious. "You're Sinbad," he says, like he's reading a menu and just spotted something spicy. You nod, trying to look dangerous despite the bruised eye. He chuckles. "You've got a reputation, you know. Thought you'd be taller." He offers you a choice. Join his crew, or rot in the brig. You glance around. The guy snoring is now chewing on a boot. You look back at the captain. "Define join," you ask. What follows is a deeply unpleasant stretch of days aboard the pirate vessel. You're not quite a prisoner, not quite free. They let you scrub decks, patch sails, and even cook once, until someone bit into a cardamom-stuffed squid and tried to toss you overboard. To stay sane, you gather information. You learn the ship is called the Widow's Smile, which feels like a terrible omen. The crew is a mix of outlaws, ex-Navy deserters, and one guy who claims he used to be a royal astrologer but got fired for making sarcastic horoscopes. A mainstream historical fact. Piracy in the Indian Ocean during this era wasn't uncommon. Many so-called pirates were actually disgruntled merchants or political exiles operating in gray zones between law and trade. Some even worked as mercenaries for sultans, if the price was right. After a week, you find your opportunity. The pirates are docked at a small, uncharted isle to resupply. More coconuts than you've ever seen in your life. You're sent ashore with 2 guards. You act cooperative. You compliment their knives. You ask thoughtful questions about their favorite kind of parrot. Then, when one guard bends to tie his sandal, you bolt. You run like your life depends on it, because it absolutely does. The jungle is dense. You duck under vines, leap over roots, and ignore the angry squawks of a parrot you may have offended. Behind you, the pirates shout and crash through the foliage, but you're faster. You've had practice. You reach the far side of the island, wheezing, sweaty, scratched, and stumble straight into a man sitting on a barrel, fishing. He looks up, blinks. You okay? Define okay. You pant. Turns out he's the helmsman of another merchant ship moored on the opposite shore. He's also extremely drunk. I'd offer you some, he says, holding up a bottle of palm wine. But I spilled most of it on a turtle. You don't ask. You beg him for passage. You even offer your boots. He laughs and waves you aboard. Any enemy of pirates is a friend of mine, he slurs. Unless you are a pirate, in which case, don't tell me. You sail away at sunset, draped in a borrowed blanket, hair full of leaves, pride in shambles, but free once again. And as the pirate ship grows small on the horizon, you feel the wind shift. Cool, playful, like the seas saying, "Welcome back." The merchant ship rocks gently beneath your feet, a much calmer rhythm than the chaos you've recently endured. The sails puff like lazy clouds, and the sky has the bruised orange glow of early dusk. You sit on a crate near the stern, nursing a bruised rib and contemplating your life choices, which at this point resemble a chaotic board game played blindfolded with a snake as your teammate. The helmsman, your newfound savior, finally introduces himself as Barter, though everyone on board calls him Tipsy Barter. And it's not exactly a mystery why. He insists on sharing his fish stew with you, which tastes like seawater and old boots. But you eat it anyway. Hunger has a way of lowering your standards. As you spoon the dubious broth, Barter points to the horizon. We head for Basra. Might take a few weeks, depending on wind and whether any sea monsters feel dramatic. You nod. Basra means Baghdad. Baghdad means home, treasure, baths, clean socks, maybe even a nap longer than 10 minutes without screaming. The ship isn't large, just a 2-masted dhow with a modest crew of 7 and enough cargo to keep pirates mildly interested. They've got silk, indigo, cardamom, and some kind of fermented fish paste that smells like it lost a bet. The captain, a serious-eyed woman named Zainab, gives you a curt nod and one instruction. Don't bring any curses on board. Reasonable. For days. The voyage is uneventful. You sleep in a corner of the hold, dream of flying serpents and meat armor, and wake up to the screech of gulls and the salty bite of ocean spray. You're lulled into a false sense of calm. You even begin telling jokes again. Your scarred hands stop trembling. You think maybe the worst is over. Cue the storm. It arrives like a punch to the jaw. One moment the sky is blue, the next it's black and furious. Rain falls sideways. Lightning dances across the sea like it's showing off. The sails snap in the wind, the timbers groan, and Zainab shouts orders you can't hear over the wind's scream. You're on deck helping to secure a cargo net when the first wave hits. It lifts the ship like a toy, flips your stomach inside out, and slams you back down. You lose your footing, tumble across the deck, and narrowly miss being flung into the ocean. Barter grabs your arm, shouting something you interpret as, "Try not to die." The second wave is worse. The ship is half swallowed by a mountain of water, then spat out again, trailing debris. One of the sails rips free and whips into the sky like a ghost giving up. You're clinging to the railing, soaked, frozen, and somewhere between prayer and profanity. And then silence. Just like that. The wind dies, the rain stops, The clouds pull back, and you find yourself drifting. The mainmast is gone. The rudder's shattered. The crew is scattered across the deck like rag dolls, moaning softly. One man is missing. A crate of cardamom floats past like a sad little boat. You've lost the storm, but also your ability to steer. You're adrift on open ocean, your ship crippled, your future once again in the hands of the sea's mood swings. Over the next few days, you try to help repair what you can. You patch the sail with bits of spare cloth. You lash crates together to form a new rudder of sorts. You even take turns at lookout, scanning the endless waves for land or ships or anything. One night, while you're standing watch, you notice something odd in the water. Shapes, floating. At first, you think they're driftwood, but as the ship drifts closer, your stomach twists. They're bodies, a dozen of them, maybe more. Men in merchant robes, tangled in torn nets. A woman with silver rings still on her fingers. A child clutching a broken paddle. No ship in sight, no wreckage, just death, bobbing quietly. You call for the others. The crew gathers. No one speaks. Zainab orders a prayer, whispered. Barter pours a little wine over the side. You stay silent, watching the faces of the dead disappear into the dusk. Mainstream historical fact. The Indian Ocean was as dangerous as it was profitable. Entire fleets would vanish without warning. Merchant caravans sunk by freak waves. Warships lost to sudden cyclones. Many ships from this era have never been found. Trade routes were lined with bones. That night, sleep won't come. You lie awake thinking about how close you've come to joining those floating ghosts. You wonder how many more close calls your luck has left in it. You wonder if fate has a plan, or if it's just winging it like you are. The next day, a shape appears on the horizon. A ship, a real one. You wave a tattered flag, shout until your throat burns. The crew scrambles to light a fire with wet oilcloth and desperation. Smoke rises. Slowly, the distant ship adjusts its course. As it gets closer, you brace yourself. Is it pirates again? Slave traders? Or worse? But the ship lowers a longboat. Minutes later, a young sailor rows over, grinning broadly. You look like you've seen the inside of a kraken's laundry basket, he says. You almost hug him. They take you aboard. It's a merchant vessel from Aden, sleek and fast, crewed by men with sharp eyes and kinder hands. They feed you dates and milk. They let you sleep. You're safe, again. For now, you wake in a hammock that doesn't try to kill you every time it sways. The Adenese ship moves like a whisper across the water, smooth and purposeful. For the first time in what feels like years, you don't wake up gasping, soaked, or screaming about carnivorous birds. The crew is friendly, in that gruff, we just saved you from certain death sort of way. You thank the captain, an older man named Hafiz with stormy eyebrows and a habit of chewing cloves, as many times as your pride will allow. He waves it off. Just don't bleed on the planks, he says. You're headed to Serendib again. Oddly enough, you'd meant to sail home to Baghdad, but the sea seems to have other ideas. And honestly, you've stopped arguing with it. Serendib comes into view like a dream half-remembered. Lush green hills, spires of gold and ivory temples, and a harbor so busy it looks like ships are queuing for gossip. You're taken ashore with the cargo manifest, officially listed as recovered asset. You're not sure if that makes you treasure or salvage. You don't head for the palace this time. You learned your lesson about overly friendly kings with large cats and no sense of boundaries. Instead, you vanish into the bustle of the port, keeping your hood low and your stories to yourself. That lasts about 10 minutes. Someone recognizes you. Sinbad! A merchant bellows from across the street. You escaped the Sultan, again? Heads turn. You groan. Fame is exhausting, but your name has value here. Enough that a local spice merchant offers you food, a bath, and a place to sleep just to hear you retell the story of the rock and the meat. You tweak the details a little. The bird is now 30 feet taller, the diamonds twice as large, and the snakes have names. You stay in Serendib a week. You eat fried plantains, drink tamarind juice, and even ride a docile elephant named Tariq, who seems to like your singing voice. You're considering staying longer, maybe open a little shop, sell sea stories and scented oils, when a royal courier finds you. You freeze, but it's not the same king. Apparently, the last one passed away, possibly choked on a mango pit, or maybe just tired of waiting for you to return with more bedtime tales. The new ruler is his cousin, young, curious, and oddly obsessed with foreigners, which is how you end up at court again, this time as an invited guest, not a collected oddity. The new sultan is lean, dressed in silks dyed with indigo and gold threads, and surrounded by books and astronomers. He waves away the guards when you enter and clasps your hand. "You're real," he says, smiling. "I thought you were made up." You resist the urge to say the same about him. This new king is different. He's a collector of knowledge, not people. He listens closely when you speak. He asks questions, real ones. Why do you think you survived all those voyages? Do you believe in fate or stubbornness? Do rock feathers really smell like cinnamon? You end up staying for days, not in captivity, but in conversation. He shows you rare maps, scrolls from Alexandria, and something he calls a wind compass, which is really just a clever piece of painted wood and wishful thinking. Mainstream historical fact: Serendib, Sri Lanka, was, during this era, a nexus of trade and knowledge. Arab sailors, Persian scholars, and Chinese merchants all passed through. Early compasses and maritime innovations traveled these routes long before Europe caught on. Quirky tidbit: the locals believe that the footprint atop the sacred mountain here, known as Adam's Peak, was left either by Adam, Buddha, or Shiva, depending on who's telling the story. The Sultan insists it's a metaphor, but swears it smells faintly of cardamom. One evening, the Sultan asks, "Do you want to go home?" You don't answer immediately. The question settles in your chest like a stone. What is home now? The Baghdad of soft cushions and spice markets? The sea itself, with its cruel games and accidental rescues? Finally, you nod. He arranges your passage. Personally, a fine ship, with silk sails and a hold full of gifts meant for the Caliph of Baghdad. Ivory, sapphires, lacquer boxes, and a living peacock that screams at dawn. You're told to guard that last one carefully. You set sail again, not chased by pirates or carried off by birds, but with banners fluttering and a crew that calls you Captain Lucky. The voyage is, dare you say it, pleasant. You sleep under stars that wink knowingly. You share meals of roasted eggplant and fresh bread. You play board games with the helmsman and win. Once, you even relax. Which, of course, is the cue for something terrible to happen. It begins with a dark dot on the horizon. Then 2, then 4. Ships, they aren't merchant vessels. They fly no banners, and they're moving fast. You call for weapons. The crew scrambles. You're about to face pirates, again. You squint at the horizon and feel your heart sink like an anchor. The ships are closing in fast, sleek, narrow, and black-hulled. Their sails like storm clouds stitched to masts. No flags, no signals, just the hungry silence of predators. The crew snaps to life around you. Sailors grab bows, axes, anything sharp. The helmsman, bless him, starts whispering what sounds suspiciously like apologies to every deity he's ever ignored. Even the peacock flaps around the deck in shrill panic, screaming as if it knows this scene all too well. You don't have the speed to outrun them, nor the firepower to fight, which means, once again, it's time to improvise. You quickly survey the cargo: ivory tusks, sapphires, silks, spices, and in the center hold, elephant bones. You grin. Maybe it's time to lean into your strange luck. "Dump the ivory!" you shout. "Leave a trail! Make it look like we're scared and trying to bribe them!" The captain blinks at you, then grins. "I like it. Crazy always works with pirates. The sailors begin hurling cargo into the sea, whole crates of carved tusks, bolts of embroidered fabric, even the screaming peacock. Don't worry, it immediately flaps back onto the deck, offended but unharmed. The water behind you becomes a glittering breadcrumb trail of riches, and just as predicted, the frontmost pirate ship slows. They're greedy, all pirates are. It's practically their job description. You keep moving. Faster now. Wind finally cooperating. You order barrels rolled to the stern and set ablaze, sending thick smoke trailing behind to blind their line of sight. It's a gamble, but it works. The pirates bicker, slow down, scatter to scoop up your floating bait. You slip away into open sea. You breathe for the first time in what feels like an hour. The crew cheers. Someone hugs you. The peacock bites that someone. Later that night, the captain invites you to the officer's cabin, where you dine on dried apricots and honey-soaked bread. She clinks a cup against yours. "You saved my ship," she says. Again, you shrug. "I tend to do that when not being kidnapped." Mainstream historical fact. Bribes at sea weren't uncommon. Merchant ships under threat would often jettison part of their cargo, usually low-grade goods, to distract pirates and buy time. A few smart captains even prepared fake treasure barrels filled with sand and shiny glass. You sail on. The sea smooths into glass. The stars above seem close enough to touch. You lean on the railing, staring at the sky's reflection, wondering how many more close calls your life can handle. The next day, land appears. Not Baghdad. Not yet. But a quiet stop along the Arabian coast to resupply and repair. You dock in a sleepy port town where even the camels look bored. The air is thick with myrrh and goat hair, and someone is always playing a flute badly. You spend a few days there. Just enough time for your legs to forget the sway of the sea. You browse market stalls, sip spiced milk, and even buy new sandals. You deserve them. Your old ones fell apart sometime around the second rock attack. Then, without ceremony, you reboard and set sail for Basra. The final stretch is calm, eerily calm. You almost expect a sea serpent to rise from the depths just to keep the pattern going. Instead, it's smooth sailing. You arrive in Basra under golden morning light. The city sparkles with minarets and marble courtyards. Palm trees sway like they've been waiting for your return. The docks are busy, but word spreads fast. "Sinbad's back!" someone shouts. And just like that, a crowd forms. Merchants, sailors, even stray goats gather to gawk at you. Children ask about the Rocky. Old men nod solemnly, as if they knew the elephant graveyard had to be real. You don't deny anything, but you don't brag either. You just smile, shake hands, accept dates wrapped in fig leaves, and then, with aching feet and a full satchel, you make your way back to Baghdad. Your home is just as you left it, except dustier, and the potted fig tree in your courtyard looks like it gave up waiting. You water it, you sit, you breathe, you're rich again, you bathe, eat real bread, sleep in a bed that doesn't sway, and for 2 whole days, you don't think about birds the size of ships or pirate bribes or jungle graveyards. But peace makes you twitchy. So when a messenger from the caliph arrives, requesting an audience, you don't hesitate. You wear your finest robe, freshly stitched, and arrive at the palace surrounded by guards and street musicians playing your theme song. You didn't ask for one, but you're flattered. Inside, the caliph greets you with raised eyebrows. "More gifts?" he asks, clearly amused. You nod and present everything. The Serendib silks, the lacquer boxes, a sapphire the size of a grape. And yes, the very agitated peacock. He accepts everything with grace, except the peacock, which he politely regifts to the palace chef with the words, "Please don't cook it. Just put it somewhere it can't scream at diplomats." You tell your story again. He listens, amused, skeptical, occasionally concerned. When you finish, he leans back and says, "You are either the luckiest man alive or the unluckiest." You smile. Sometimes it's the same thing. And with that, you leave, home again. Treasure secured, story told. At least for now. You try, really try, to settle into normal life again. Your bed is soft. The air smells like cardamom and home, and there are no snakes or pirate sails in sight. Yet, after a few weeks, something inside you starts to itch. Not physically, though those jungle bug bites are still healing, but that deeper, familiar itch. Boredom. You've got enough gold to feed every cat in Baghdad for a decade, but peace tastes bland. The kind of bland that makes you wander your garden talking to trees just to simulate conversation. Your neighbors start giving you side eyes. One of them whispers that Sinbad talks to plants now, he's finally cracked. And just when you start wondering if you have cracked, the Sultan of Serendib sends a letter. Yes, him, delivered by a servant in robes so fine you can see your face in their stitching. The letter is sealed in wax and smells faintly of sandalwood. You open it, already bracing for bad news. Instead, it's polite, grateful, even a little warm. He's been bragging about you. He writes, "Your discovery of the elephant graveyard has elevated his kingdom's wealth and prestige. The bones you led him to, those tusks, those ancient remains, have turned his island into a trade capital. He wants you to visit again, as a guest. No death traps, no rock birds, no pirate ships, just a formal invitation to return and enjoy the gratitude of a now much richer kingdom. You're suspicious, of course, but you're also flattered and bored. You accept. The journey back to Serendib is miraculously uneventful. No storms, no monsters, just gentle waves and fresh mangoes on deck. When you arrive, the difference is immediate. The port city now glitters with prosperity. The harbors are packed with foreign ships, flags from India, China, even the far Greek Isles. Elephants parade down avenues paved in polished stone. Market stalls groan under spices and gems. You are welcomed like royalty. And the Sultan? He hugs you. Let that sink in. A man who once threatened your life now embraces you like a long-lost cousin. He insists you stay in the palace, gives you your own garden suite, and assigns 2 court musicians to play you to sleep every night. You kindly ask them to stop after day 2. Nobody needs a flute solo at midnight. Soon, you realize the Sultan isn't just fond of you, he's fascinated. You're his walking, talking novel. Each meal, he asks for another tale. He especially loves the rock story. Makes you repeat the part where you cling to the diamond-studded meat as the bird lifts you into the sky. Like a flying shish kebab, he laughs, tears in his eyes. Mainstream historical fact. Many royal courts, from China to Persia, kept foreign travelers or ambassadors as honored guests, not only for diplomacy, but as status symbols. Having a well-traveled guest with exotic tales was a sign of worldliness and power. He parades you around during court sessions like you're his personal artifact. Here, he tells a visiting noble from Siam, is the man who found the graveyard of the tusked giants. Ask him anything, and they do, about everything. Your adventures, your shipwrecks, your digestive health. Royal curiosity is boundless and at times uncomfortably intimate. Still, it's not bad. You dine on dishes infused with gold leaf, sleep in a bed of embroidered silk. There's a sunken bath so warm and floral it makes you consider never leaving. But as weeks go by, you begin to sense a shift. The Sultan grows more possessive. He cancels your excursions outside the palace. Your letters home are delayed. You hear whispers from servants. He might be planning to keep you here forever. A human museum exhibit. You test it. You suggest, casually, that you're considering returning to Baghdad. The Sultan laughs, a long, strange laugh. "Oh, Sinbad," he says, clapping your shoulder. "You're too valuable to lose again. The room suddenly feels colder. Fringe tidbit. In some ancient courts, guests of honor were subtly transformed into permanent fixtures, kept comfortable but forbidden to leave. Historians still argue whether this was honor, imprisonment, or both. You know what this means. It's time to plan your exit. You start small, making friends with palace guards, memorizing routines, stashing a few coins and jewels. You bribe a kitchen boy to sneak a message to the port. You even fake an illness to avoid a royal dinner and slip out to map the corridors. Eventually, you stage a disappearance on a moonless night, dressed as a humble spice vendor. You escape the palace and make it to the harbor. One of your old sailor friends, now captain of a modest cargo ship, takes you aboard without questions. You sail away as the city sleeps, its towers fading behind you, its riches left untouched. You don't breathe easy until Serendib is nothing but a memory in the sea mist. Back in Basra, you swear, again, that this will be your final voyage. Back in Baghdad, you swear it twice, but you can already feel it, can't you? That itch in your bones, that little voice whispering, just one more. Still, for now, you stay. You invest in businesses, commission musicians, buy yourself a new cat. Your last one joined the peacock in eternal grumpiness. You become a minor celebrity in your neighborhood. Yet each time someone mentions an island, or a ship, or a bird with wings the size of a house, your eyes drift east. You try very hard not to go back to sea. Truly, you do. You build yourself a home with a tiled courtyard and lemon trees. You host dinners, tell stories, even start writing them down at the prodding of your more literary friends. But no one writes just one Sinbad tale, do they? And then, you guessed it, a trader from Oman stumbles into your courtyard one morning, soaked in sweat and wonder. "There's a land," he gasps, "where the ground burns your feet. The sky is the color of brass, and the trees grow glass, entire forests. Sinbad, made of glinting glass branches, and the locals wear cloaks of woven flame." You squint at him. "You sure you didn't inhale too much spice smoke?" But he insists, even has a map. You spend a week pacing, staring at the sea, telling yourself no, and then you go, because of course you do. You join a merchant convoy sailing eastward, through waters thick with mist and secrets. The captain, a scar-faced woman named Harira, warns you. Where we're headed, compasses cry. That place eats steel, spits storms. Sounds familiar. The journey is uneventful at first. Blue skies, lazy dolphins, drunken sailors playing dice with turtle shells. You help mend sails and exchange old stories, carefully omitting the part where a rock once mistook you for a kebab. But things shift as you near the map's edge. The sea grows thicker, like syrup. The sun bleeds red at noon. And then, on the 5th morning, you see it. Land that glimmers like broken mirrors beneath a purple sky. The island of glass. And yes, the trees are real. Their trunks are smooth, translucent quartz. Their leaves tinkle like wind chimes. Light refracts through the branches into rainbows that paint the ground. It's breathtaking, otherworldly, completely impossible. And you love it. Mainstream historical fact. Reports of islands with glass-like terrain may stem from sailors encountering silica-rich volcanic regions or massive salt flats that shimmer in heat. Over time, these sites morphed into mythical crystal lands. You dock in a bay where the sand is powdered obsidian. The locals greet you with cautious hospitality. They wear layered robes that shimmer like oil on water and speak a language like birdsong and bells. You communicate through trade. One of your coins, polished to a shine, delights a child so much she gives you a glowing stone in return. You're shown to their central shrine, a massive structure of fused glass and gold that hums with heat. Inside, you notice something strange. Etched into the walls are maps, familiar ones. You recognize outlines, Serendib, the Diamond Valley, even what could be the coast of Baghdad. And at the center, a spiral symbol, The same spiral you saw carved into the tusk back in the elephant graveyard. Your stomach knots. Quirky tidbit. Spirals appear across countless ancient cultures, from the Neolithic tombs of Ireland to the carvings of Polynesia. Their meanings range from the sun's path to metaphors for life's cyclical nature. But in sailor lore, spirals mean one thing: a pull you can't escape. You ask the locals, they grow silent. An elder eventually speaks. "Long ago," she whispers, "our ancestors walked the spiral. They say the sea moved for them, that they carried a storm in their bones." You pretend not to shiver. She offers you a gift, a robe made of something like silk, but warm and smooth as wind-blown glass. "For your next path," she says, "you stay a few days. Listen to their music. Watch how they harvest fruit by singing to the trees. Every night, you feel the spiral drawing tighter." Historians still argue whether this portion of your voyage was a dream induced by fever, a misremembered volcanic island, or a poetic flourish designed to symbolize inner transformation. But for you, it's as real as salt. On your last night, you follow a procession into the jungle of glass. They lead you to a crater filled with glowing sand. In the center, atop a stone pillar, lies a scroll. Ancient, fragile. You're told it's part of the first path. You take it carefully, and in that moment, something changes. The wind stops. The trees go silent. Even your heart pauses, just for a beat. When you leave the next morning, the sky is no longer purple, the ocean no longer syrup. The island, from a distance, looks entirely ordinary, as if it was never magical at all. But in your pack is a scroll etched in spiral symbols, and in your mind, a question you can't shake. What is the first path? You don't have answers. Not yet, but you know this. You're not done. Not even close. You return to Baghdad like a man with a storm in his pocket. No one notices at first. You're the same Sinbad, with new trinkets, a fancier robe, and a story about an island made of light. But deep inside, something's been rewired. A gear has clicked into place, and you're humming with it, like a compass needle that's finally found its north. Even if you don't know what it's pointing toward, you set the scroll from the island of glass on your table and stare at it daily. The spiral pattern is maddening, both symmetrical and wild, like a maze and a whirlpool all at once. You show it to a few scholars at the bazaar, but they either laugh it off as decorative fluff or go suspiciously silent, eyes darting like they've seen a ghost. So you start tracing the path yourself. You spread out every map you've collected over your voyages, lay them side by side. Serendib, the Valley of Diamonds, that island with the whale who wasn't a whale. You draw little spirals on each, and they start to line up, roughly, strangely, as if you've unknowingly been orbiting something ancient, something central. You ask around. You hear whispers of a lost mariner's route, known only to a handful of sailors before vanishing into myth. The Marrow Path, some call it, a string of islands, shipwrecks, and anomalies forming a loose coil across the sea. Historians still argue whether the Marrow Path was ever a real navigational concept, or just a poetic way of describing trade routes that connected diverse ancient cultures. Some think it was a smuggler's trail. Others think it's a metaphor for death. You decide to follow it. This time, the ship you book is small and unassuming. No lavish gifts, no crates of silk, just you, two loyal crewmen from past voyages, and a hold stocked with dried apricots, and a goat who hates you personally. The journey begins oddly calm. Too calm. You pass known ports, Gujarat, Socotra, without incident. You even spot a school of flying fish that arc like silver commas across the bow. But each night, when you consult the scroll and your stitched-together map, it's like you're playing a tune only you can hear. And then you reach the Whirlpool Sea. Not a legend, not an exaggeration, an actual sea where warm and cold currents slam into each other in an eternal wrestling match, churning up whirlpools that could swallow a galleon whole. You skirt it, barely, using tricks you learned from that blind navigator you met 3 voyages ago, the one who steered by the taste of salt on his lip. And just beyond the churning madness, silence. No birds, no waves, just an expanse of sea so still it looks like the sky has fallen. It's here you find the wrecks, hundreds of them, ships from every era and empire, Roman triremes, Chinese junks, Viking longboats. They rest in quiet congregation, their sails torn, their hulls half submerged, like a drowned navy gathering for judgment. You lower anchor. It's shallow enough to wade, and there, tangled in seaweed and moonlight, you find it. The symbol again, etched onto a mast, painted onto a shield, even carved into an oar. Spirals. Always spirals. One wreck catches your eye more than the others. Its hull is made of something like bone, off-white, slightly translucent, and humming. It has no nails, no rope, just sinew and shaped plates, like it was grown, not built. Quirky tidbit. Some early Polynesian and Austronesian ships were constructed using lashed lug technology, wood bound together without nails. While not made of bone, this technique inspired legends of living ships that some believe reached as far as Madagascar. You and your crew climb aboard. Inside, the hold is dry. Impossible. And inside the hold is a box. You open it with the reverence of someone diffusing a celestial trap. And inside lies an orb, smooth, faintly warm, filled with a pulsing amber light, like it contains a tiny sunset. You don't know what it is. Your crew doesn't know what it is. But you take it, because if the marrow path leads anywhere, it's wherever this came from. On the return sail, strange things happen. You lose 3 days to fog so dense it tastes like metal. Your goat speaks, just once, in perfect Arabic. Turn back, it says, then never again. The stars rearrange one night to form. Yes, really a spiral. Back in Baghdad, you don't tell anyone about the orb. You place it beside the scroll, and for a full hour, it glows brighter. Like it recognizes home, you start to dream in spirals. You begin to wonder, what if you haven't been unlucky? What if you've been called? It's the dreams that finally push you back to sea. At first, they're just flickers, spirals forming in your tea, birds flying in corkscrews, carpets curling up like ammonites. But then they grow teeth. You see a city made of bone-white towers spiraling endlessly into the clouds, a bell tolling beneath the ocean. An island shaped like an eye, and always, always that voice whispering, "One more turn." You wake every morning drenched in sweat, the orb on your table pulsing faintly beside the ancient scroll. You're not being invited, you're being summoned, so you do what you do best. You pack a bag. This time, you skip ships and hire a balloon. Yes, a hot air contraption from the West, built by 2 half-mad Andalusian brothers with wine-stained blueprints and a bird named Bertrand. They call it the wind rat. You call it a floating death trap. But it does offer one advantage. It flies over the sea, not on it. Besides, you've survived cyclopes and scorpions the size of donkeys. A balloon? That's just Tuesday. Your goal. A place the scroll suggests lies beyond known waters, at the spiral's heart. A myth, if you believe your saner friends. A certainty, if you believe the orb, now vibrating gently every time you face south by southeast. The wind rat launches on a pale dawn. You glide above the waves, past known currents, past islands with no names and coastlines shaped like scimitars. Below you, whales breach and ships drift. One pirate sloop tries to throw grappling hooks your way, but you just drop a barrel of spoiled dates on their deck. Very satisfying. Mainstream historical fact. By the 9th century, Abbasid engineers and inventors like Abbas ibn Firnas experimented with gliding flight and theoretical propulsion systems, centuries before Da Vinci's famous sketches. While balloons as we know them didn't exist yet, the notion of flying machines definitely tickled medieval imaginations. Several days into the journey, you cross into a blank spot on every map. The sea turns gray. Not stormy, just colorless, featureless. And then you see it, the eye, an island, perfectly circular, with a black lake at its center. As you descend, your balloon shudders. The orb glows fiercely now, almost hot. You land on a field of soft, ashen grass and step into silence so deep it hums. The eye's shores are ringed with stone pillars carved in spiral motifs. At the center, the black lake reflects the sky too perfectly, like it's not water, but glass. You approach, and something beneath the surface moves. It's not a creature. It's a structure, a spiral staircase. You step into the lake, which isn't wet at all, more like passing through cool breath. The orb guides your hand. You touch the surface, and it parts. You descend. The staircase spirals down into a vast dome lit from nowhere. The walls are carved with every symbol you've seen on your travels. Diamonds, rock feathers, volcanoes, glass trees, even the whale island. All here, as if someone has been chronicling your life before you lived it. Quirky tidbit. Ancient Sumerians believed in me, a tablet of destinies, a divine record that held every possible path of a soul. Some speculate later myths like the Book of Thoth, or even the Akashic records grew from this shared impulse. The belief that lives are written somewhere, waiting to be read. At the center of the chamber sits a pedestal. On it, a third artifact. Not a scroll, not an orb, a mirror. You look into it, and see not your reflection, but your first voyage. The sailor version of yourself, young and reckless, tricked by a whale island, nearly drowned. You blink. Now you see yourself fleeing giant serpents. Now charming a queen, now offering a pearl to a monkey god. Each image flickers like a memory. Yet they aren't memories. They're possibilities. Historians still argue whether the legend of Sinbad contains the adventures of multiple individuals conflated over time. Merchants, pirates, wanderers. Some posit that Sinbad was a title passed down, or even a story template used to make sense of regional legends. You, however, are starting to wonder if you've been all of them. If Sinbad is not a person, but a pattern, you reach out, and the mirror darkens. In its place, a spiral map made of light, rotating slowly. The Marrow Path's final segment, and at its center, a city, suspended over water, made entirely of spirals. It pulses faintly, as if waiting, and you know, with bone-deep certainty, that this is the end of the road. One last voyage, one last story, one last fall into the spiral. You ascend from the Island's depths like a man reborn. The spiral map still dances behind your eyelids, burned in by light or fate or something older than either. You barely feel the passage of time. You're not even sure if you sleep on the way back. The wind rat drifts north again, the orb nestled in your lap, warm and still as a sleeping heart. Back in Baghdad, you barely speak. You write, you draw, you build models out of sand and string and broken spoons. You pin maps to walls, connect dots with thread, recalculate stars with charcoal and a compass. Your neighbors think you've finally gone mad. You haven't. You've just found purpose. This final voyage isn't about gold or survival or even storytelling. It's about completing the spiral. You hire a ship. Not too big, not too small. You name it the Coil. The orb gets its own velvet-lined box nailed into the floor of your cabin. You take the mirror, too, though it hasn't shown anything new. Just that same glowing city, suspended in fog like a chandelier made of bone and light. Your crew? Volunteers from past voyages. Not many, just enough. There's the sailor who once fought off a giant crab with a wooden spoon. The cook who makes stew out of anything, including, once, a boot. And the linguist who speaks 9 tongues and curses in 10. You sail east, always east, Past the edge of every charted coast, days turn to weeks. You pass islands that flicker in and out of sight. One is entirely made of glass. One is covered in red moss that sings at night. Another has a single tree in the center, and that tree weeps ink. On the 14th day, the orb pulses again. The water glows, and there it is, the city, rising from the sea like it never left. No walls, no gates, just towers and domes curling upward, impossibly tall, reflecting sunlight in long loops. There are no birds, no docks, just silence. And then your ship stops, not breaks, stops, as if the sea has turned to stone. You lower a boat and row forward, orb in hand. The water parts around you, rippling in slow spirals. It smells faintly of memory, like papyrus, salt, and something almost familiar. Childhood? Jasmine? Fear? You dock at a platform of polished white stone. No guards, no people, just steps. You climb. Each level of the city reveals new marvels. Streets paved with light, archways that whisper your name, murals that depict your journeys in impossible detail. Except, in some, you die, drowned, burned, forgotten. You walk through your own alternate histories, mainstream historical fact. Many ancient civilizations, including the Greeks and Indians, believed in cyclical time, that life repeated in loops, that heroes were reborn, that fate was a wheel. The spiral, for them, wasn't just a shape. It was a map of the soul. At the city's center stands a spire. It twists into the clouds like a frozen tornado, capped with something too bright to stare at. You climb its steps, orb in hand, your breath echoing off the stone like a drumbeat. Around you, the city thrums with a power you can't name. Inside the spire, you find a chamber, and in that chamber, finally, someone else. A figure, tall, cloaked, no face. It gestures towards the orb, and you offer it. It doesn't take it, it simply listens to it. The orb pulses once, twice, and then dims, its energy absorbed, its story told. The mirror glows now, floating beside you. You look, you expect more visions, but all it shows is you. Not past, not future, just you, breathing, real, here. And then the figure speaks, in a voice made of waves and ash. You have completed the coil. Quirky tidbit. In some Sufi traditions, the spiritual journey is described as a spiral, not a straight ascent toward enlightenment, but a turning, returning path, where each revolution brings deeper understanding of the self. The seeker travels outward, only to come back in, again and again, until the center is found. You ask what it all meant. The voice does not answer. Instead, it gestures behind you, toward an opening in the spire. You step through, and the sea is gone. Below you, stars, galaxies curling like ammonites in the void. The city isn't on water. It's above everything, suspended in the firmament like a pearl on a string. You fall to your knees. The mirror fades. The orb turns to ash in its box, and the voice says, "One more turn?" You say yes. Of course you do. Because who could refuse? The chamber begins to hum, low and steady, like a lullaby sung by a mountain. The air grows thick, but not heavy, more like velvet wrapping around your skin. The cloaked figure bows, not in reverence, but in recognition. Then it steps backward into the shadows and vanishes, like smoke inhaled by the walls. The mirror, once floating, now hovers at eye level. Its surface ripples, showing no images, only spirals folding into spirals. You reach toward it, hesitantly, reverently, and your fingers pass through. It's not glass anymore. It's a doorway. You step in. The world changes. You are no longer in a city, no longer in the sky. You're in a story, not reading it, not hearing it, living it, at the level of the ink. You walk across parchment deserts, past letters tall as trees, riding the loops of calligraphy like dunes. The script is not Arabic, not Persian, not any human tongue. It's the story's language, and it's writing you. Every footstep you take appears in text behind you. Every breath, every memory, even that awkward time you tried to trade a talking fish for a ship's wheel. It's all there now, catalogued, unspooling behind you like a ribbon of truth. Mainstream historical fact. In Islamic tradition, there is the concept of al-Lawh al-Mahfuz, the preserved tablet, upon which all events of the past, present, and future are recorded by divine decree. Some scholars debated its metaphorical versus literal meaning, but for mystics and poets, it was real and eternal. As you walk, scenes bloom around you. You pass Sinbad, the first Sinbad, the sailor you once were. He's hauling cargo in a modest boat, unaware of sea monsters or islands that aren't. You pass another Sinbad, drowning, lungs full of salt, calling out to a wife who doesn't exist. You see another, laughing beside a roc's egg, eating dates with monkeys. All of them are you. All of them are not you. One version gives up after Voyage 2 and becomes a carpenter. Another one never survives the Whale Island. One even builds a new Baghdad, floating in a desert made of crystal, teaching children how to fly kites shaped like stars. The paths multiply. Fractals, infinite retellings of your tale. Historians still argue whether the Sinbad voyages were allegories, perhaps teaching moral lessons or reflecting trade routes and political commentary. Others insist they're fantasy-made flesh, manifestations of dream logic, built on the archetype of the eternal wanderer. What is agreed upon, however, is this. The Sinbad tales endure because they transform with the teller. And now it's your turn. At the end of the script desert, a final page floats in mid-air. Blank, waiting. A quill forms in your hand, made from a feather. You realize of yourself. From that time you were turned into a bird. Remember that? The tree that spoke in riddles and the wind that carried you to the plateau of mournful gorillas? Yeah, that one. The feather still smells faintly of cinnamon and panic. You dip it into your own shadow, and write. You write your final voyage. Not the events, but the meaning. What it all felt like. The beauty of survival. The joy of discovery. The heartbreak of losing a crewmate to laughter sickness. The awe of watching stars rise from underwater towers. You sign it, Sinbad, then add again. The page folds into itself and vanishes. You are lifted, not metaphorically, physically. The parchment crumbles into golden dust, and you rise with it. Higher, higher, until the spiral city unfolds again beneath you. But now, you understand it. Each tower is a tale, each arch a question, each spiral a choice. You're not the center. You're just one turn of the coil, and that is enough. Quirky tidbit. In some medieval Islamic mysticism, spirals represented the unfolding of divine will. The more one moved inward through contemplation and trial, the more they reached marifa, deep experiential knowledge. Not knowing that, but knowing as. The voice returns softer this time. You may go home now. A stair appears. Just one. You step onto it. It becomes 2, then 4, and then you're walking down an invisible staircase, spiraling slowly, descending not in space but in tone. The world dims, the stars mute. The city fades behind your closed eyelids. You wake, back on your ship. The coil, the crew gathered, mouths open, as if you've been gone for seconds or years. The mirror lies shattered on the floor. The orb? Gone. In your pocket, 1 feather. That's all? That, and everything. You dock in Baghdad under a quiet, pearl gray dawn. The crew disembarks with hushed voices and faraway eyes. They don't speak of what happened. Not because they've forgotten, but because some things are too large for words. They return to their homes, their markets, their camels and kettles and card games, carrying something soft and invisible in their chests. And you? You go home too, but not to the house you left. That place, full of ship models, ancient maps, and a particularly loud parrot who never learned to say your name, is sold now. Instead, you buy a small, sunlit room near the edge of the city, where jasmine leans in through the windows and the breeze hums like the coil of a distant, eternal engine. You don't sail again? At least not on water. Now you sail on stories. You spend your days retelling the voyages, not as brags or cautionary tales, but as dreams half remembered. You sit in the tea house with children in your lap and bakers at your feet. You whisper to scribes and spice vendors, and even the guards who once charged you triple tax just for wearing a feathered hat. They all listen now. You leave nothing out, even the parts where you cried, or failed, or got scammed by a monkey wearing a crown. Especially those. And soon, people begin telling their own voyages back to you. Tales of rivers that taste like honey. Cities beneath the sand. Talking mountains. Ghost libraries. A boy who chased his own shadow into the sky. Historians still argue whether the Sinbad stories were passed orally or written first. The earliest manuscripts date back to the 9th century, but regional variants, Chinese, Indian, African, suggest they were already traveling far before ink touched parchment. It's likely they were kept alive not by scholars, but by street performers and night watchmen, by people like you. One night, a girl asks, "Were they all real?" And you smile, the same way the figure in the tower smiled. The answer, of course, is yes, and also no, because reality, like oceans, has depth. Mainstream historical fact. The tales of Sinbad were later folded into the broader collection of 1001 Nights, even though many scholars believe they originated separately. This syncretism, where stories were stitched together across centuries and continents, is a hallmark of classical Arabic storytelling. Truth braided with dream, history tangled with wonder, quirky tidbit. In some fringe medieval theories, the world was shaped not like a sphere or a flat disk, but like a spiral, a cosmic shell, always turning inward toward a divine source. If you walked far enough, the theory went, you'd eventually reach the beginning, or the end, or both. And that's what it felt like, didn't it? To turn, to begin, to end, to begin again? Sometimes you take the feather from your pocket. It's changed over the years, grown smoother, brighter. One night, it hums like a tuning fork. Another, it casts a faint light on your ceiling in the shape of a starfish. And every time you hold it, you remember, not just what you did, but what you became. The coil is complete, and it never ends. You fall asleep often with a cup of tea still warm beside your bed, and an old sailor's map folded into your lap. Your dreams are gentler now, though still filled with the occasional talking goat or staircase made of clouds. And somewhere far away, or maybe just inside you, the spiral city waits, watching, turning, whispering your name in a language older than fire. You made it. You turned the page. You didn't just survive, you lived. And in the end, isn't that the best voyage of all? The sea is quiet now. The sails are furled. The storm has passed. And the stars, oh, the stars, are finally still. Their light trickles down over Baghdad's rooftops like spilled honey, soft and slow and golden. You lie back on the deck of memory, warm wood beneath you, and feel the gentle sway of a ship that no longer needs to move. The wind doesn't tug anymore. It cradles. It hums. It understands. Far off, gulls cry lazily over a dock where you once bartered for coconuts and maps. The sound stretches like fabric, pulled thin with time, softened by distance. Everything is slower now, softer. You breathe in, and with that breath comes cinnamon, salt, sunlight on old leather, And maybe, just maybe, the scent of some place not yet reached. But it will come, in its own time. You're not chasing now. You're waiting. And the waiting is warm. Your bones feel lighter. Your stories, heavier, but in a good way, in a satisfying way. Like blankets stacked over your chest. One tale after another. Until you are wrapped in all the lives you've lived. And none of them are lost. Not one. So rest now. No monsters, no puzzles, no spirals to climb. Just the steady beat of a heart that's come home. And a voice far away, whispering, "Well done. Sleep tight, sailor. The sea can wait."